October 7th, 2023, Hamas leaders are learning, or pretending to learn, about the attack on southern Israel for the first time. They include then-leader Ismail Haniyeh and Khalil al-Hayya, the target of today's attack, all gathered in Doha, Qatar. The Israelis eventually killed Haniyeh, but they did it while he was visiting Iran, not in Qatar.
The president views Qatar as a strong ally and friend of the United States and feels very badly about the location of this attack.
It's not the who, but the where of this attack that represents an escalation.
When the Hamas office was opened in Qatar several years ago, it was done with the very explicit support of the US and Israel. It was not done against their wishes.
Tiny Qatar is not only home to the leadership of Hamas, it also hosts the headquarters of US Central Command and the largest airbase in the Middle East. And those aren't the only strange bedfellows. The Sheraton Doha is where the US negotiated its withdrawal from Afghanistan with the Taliban, who also have an office there.
Qatar has also made the decision that given its physical vulnerability as a tiny flat country, sandwiched between Iran and Saudi Arabia, that the best way to ensure its security would be to make itself indispensable. That's why it is hosting the largest US military base in the Middle East. That's why it has played that role of mediator, not only between Israel and Hamas, but within multiple other conflicts as well.
The latest strike could make Qatar reconsider that role.
One option is that Qatar walks away from its mediation role, specifically with regards to Hamas, and then the Hamas political office, or whatever is left of it after the strike, leaves, goes perhaps to Turkey or to Iran.
That would make future ceasefire talks harder, but then that may have been one of the purposes of the attack.
The Netanyahu administration is committed to a plan that it has stated publicly and that is closely coordinated with the Trump administration to conquer and take over Gaza and ethnically cleanse the population that lives there. And so if you have a diplomatic settlement that calls for a ceasefire, an exchange of hostages, that doesn't advance that broader goal that Netanyahu is clearly committed to. So you kill the peace negotiators.
Qatar is in no position to retaliate militarily against Israel, but it may have few options other than to continue to serve the interests of larger powers as the only way to protect itself in a neighborhood full of predators. Evan Dyer, CBC News, Ottawa.
Let's bring in Janice Stein, founding director of the Munk School of Global Affairs, one of the most well-connected analysts in this country. Janice, Israel's strike in Qatar. What's the strategy there?
The strategy makes no sense to me whatsoever, Adrienne. By bombing in the home country of the mediator, Israel annoyed the President of the United States, embarrassed him. That is their only remaining superpower friend.
And does this accomplish anything?
Well, what it does clearly is take Qatar out for now as a mediator and shut down this round of negotiations and kill the deal that Donald Trump had put on the table. I was never very optimistic about it, but this kills that deal.
Okay, why would you do that?
I think at this point, the Prime Minister of Israel is more afraid of a negotiated settlement, a prolonged settlement with a commitment to stay in the process, than he is about continuing and eliminating so-called the last stronghold of Hamas. I don't think that will work either.
So you said that this pulls Qatar out of the negotiating role. Who steps in?
There's no question that Egypt will step in. There have to be negotiations for this to end. And what we are seeing, Adrienne, is a much greater alignment. All the Arab countries, and I think even this Prime Minister of Israel understands we're approaching the end game here.
All day we've been hearing reaction to the strike, condemnation from countries around the world, including from the US president. But condemnation without consequences, do those words then have any currency at all?
They really don't, Adrienne, and even the condemnation was qualified. The president talked about how disappointed he was, but then finished up by saying, but eliminating Hamas is a worthy goal. So it was qualified condemnation with absolutely no action to follow.
Does that make it just performative?
Yes. Much about what we saw in the last week or so is performative. I think the chances of a deal were very low. I think Hamas met to consider a deal. that it knew it would not accept. And I think Prime Minister Netanyahu himself did not want this deal. There was performance everywhere.
What would it take for there to be actual consequences, do you think?
The United States would have to slow down or stop the supply of military equipment to Israel. That would matter.
No sign that's happening.
No sign whatsoever that's happening.
One of the things you're very, very good at is looking ahead. So your sense of the next move that we might see here from Qatar, from Israel, or from Hamas?
I think the next move will be, tragically, an accelerated offensive in Gaza City. I think the Egyptians will step in and the Emiratis will step in to push Hamas as hard as it can to actually agree to a ceasefire. And the next round of negotiations will be led by Egypt.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says, this could open the door to the end of the war. Could it?
That's what he thinks, because he thinks he can eliminate the remaining military leaders of Hamas. I think that's a fantasy, Adrienne. For every leader that is so-called eliminated, there are 10 behind. But I do think there are growing pressures on Netanyahu from inside the country to end this, as well as pressures from the United States, and the Arab countries are beginning to relentlessly pressure Hamas. That's what matters.
Okay. Janice Stein, thank you.
You're welcome.